And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back to the Valley of the Judged. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra, and with me, as always, is my good brother here in the temple, the man behind our monthly adventures, and the man running his own tribunal, good brother Monarch.
And here in a few days, you'll be able to see those adventures as me and Monk will talk about Oshi, the anime director most of you will know behind Ghost in the Shell.
Yep. Along with us having a conspiracy theory on one project he's associated with recently that we have a hard time believing was anything but a rib.
Yeah. But we'll get into that on the 5th. For today, we're going to be talking about Shroud of the Ancients again.
Yep.
Slight change to the scheduling. We're going to be wrapping this up today rather than splitting it between this week and next.
Yeah, it just means that the schedule gets bumped up by a week.
Yeah.
Largely because it was determined that what was going to be originally in next week was too much fluff and not enough crunch for it to be worth it for the way we have things formatted here. And
don't get me wrong, I like that there's a nice section with all the gods in it with some decent information on all of them. It's good for world setting. Not something we were really going to go over, though.
Yeah. So, we are going to be going over, as the title says, combat and magic tonight. And after that, give our final thoughts, though those of you who are a bit canny on things may have put two and two together as far as what we think of Shroud of the Ancients.
Yeah. I'm willing to be proven wrong if there's some really interesting stuff coming up in combat and magic. It is a huge chunk of the game, so there could be something really good in here.
Yeah. So, first off, we have how combat works. Again, another typo with the very lethal all in one word like that. So, A standard combat round is described as combat's initiated, surprise round if applicable. Top of the round, cycle around the table, determine action points, which is going to be awareness plus D5. Destiny die, it's exploding. Order of actions, highest agility score to lowest. Then turn the actions the player takes before moving on to the next rank. The total action points spent in a turn cannot exceed your agility times 2. Then actions attack, cast a spell, move, etc. Subtract the appropriate action points from your total. Defend, if you wish to make a defensive action to try and avoid the effects of a successful attack. Apply damage or action effects as necessary. Resolve any critical hits if necessary. Proceed to next character's turn. This is continued until all action points have been spent or combat stops. If it continues, top of next round, etc. I'd say that's a pretty standard approach. There's a couple things that we'll be getting into, especially regarding attacks and defense. We have already talked about the D5 approach and how perplexing it is. So we won't go over that again here. But first we have surprise rounds, which is pretty standard. If both sides are unaware of the other, an awareness check is made at TN 25. Anyone failing to reach that is surprised and cannot act until the following round. If one side is lying in wait to the other, the awareness check is made at a target number based on the results of the hide or conceal check of the party. Additionally, anyone who just fails their TN roll does not receive an agility modifier to their natural defense score until their first action. So that's our flat-footed penalty, which I will note is put in there a bit more reliably than some games where I had to shuffle around pages to find, okay, what gets penalized if I'm flat-footed, since you have a whole thing in it in the character sheet. I think
I'm a little thrown off, though, by if both sides are unaware of the other.
Mm-hmm.
If both sides are unaware of each other, why is combat just suddenly breaking out? Why is there a check being made here?
I get the intent, but I feel like that should have been further back, because more often than not, you're going to have one side initiating and the other side unaware.
I'm just trying to wrap my head around what the situation this ruling would even come up in would be.
Mm-hmm. But then we have initiative order. Characters act in order of their agility from highest to lowest, which is pretty standard. Sorry, I moved one page back when I didn't want to.
You're good. But yeah, with action points, we've kind of already covered how those work.
Mm-hmm.
Roll your die, add awareness. Attack roll, 5d5 plus skill and attribute rank. Each 5 rolled on your destiny die lets you roll the die again. So that works as we've already covered with the destiny dice.
Yeah. Every 5 points you get above, you can add +1 to the damage or effect of your attack. Additionally, the more successful your attack roll, the greater the chance you struck a vital area. Consult the hit location chart for that sort of thing. So this basically determines where you possibly hit, based on how higher or lower over the based on how much higher you are over the TN. I will be honest, when it comes to hit locations, this is always something I'm kind of iffy on. If only because it leads to it's an attempt at realism, but it leads to some unrealistic results, ironically. Like you swinging for somebody in melee and you hit them in the calf. because of how hit location is set up in some games. Hit location is something that works much better when you're dealing primarily with ranged weapons than with melee.
Yeah.
Like, this is the reason you're not going to see me raise a fuss about hit location in, say, Battletech / Mech Warrior, because the majority of combat is going to be with guns, missiles, and lasers. Occasionally you'll have a bladed weapon like with, say, the Axeman or the Hatchet Man, or a reinforced battle fist. But more often than not, it's gonna be with shooting.
I will say, I'm a little annoyed because I don't really know from this page or from what it looks like the next, what does it really matter that I'm hitting there? Like, what are the actual ramifications mechanically?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure it'll get into it a little later, but I feel like there should be something about that here.
Yeah. We do have a little... but the hit location is based on how much over the TN you hit. So, body / chest, up to 10 over. Primary arm, 11 to 14. Secondary arm, 15 to 16. Primary leg, 17 to 20. Secondary leg, 21 to 22. Head, 23 to 24. Vital area, 25 or more.
Because as we know, the head is not a vital area. Nothing's going on up in the head. That's not that important.
Yeah, this hit location thing is odd. And
vital area specific.
And it further reinforces my mindset when it comes to hit location systems, that in some regard, a lot of people are going to describe how they attack an enemy, and you aren't taking some of that narrative control away with hit locations. I know some people like the randomness of, okay, you swing for someone and you hit them in a spot you weren't aiming for. But again, it's a case of trying to be realistic, but creating more unrealistic situations as a result.
Yeah.
But
yeah, we do quickly after that have a nice little chart of combat actions.
Mm-hmm. Which
point costs and whatnot. Nice to have here.
Oh yeah. And we can see how much action points cost. I am still iffy about some of the action point distribution. For example, the fact that a 5-foot step costs 5 AP.
Yeah, which is the... Oh no, it ends up being a little less than attack block parry.
Mm-hmm. But then we have maneuvers and modifiers, assisting others, which we've kind of already talked about last time.
Yeah.
Then awareness attacks, which is the equivalent of pocket sand. This reduces the target's awareness by the damage of the attack and reduces their action points accordingly. Most awareness attacks will have duration, so the effects continue to reduce their APs and awareness attributes or skill checks. The latter at the SM's discretion. Then block / parry. You can actively block by spending action points. If a character is attacked by someone, you can decide to block the attack. You deduct the necessary points for the block based on 5 points plus the speed of your weapon or armor from your AP total. Then you roll 5d5 plus skill rank plus shield modifier. If the total of the PC's roll is higher than that of his attacker, the PC has blocked to the blow or portion of it. To determine how much damage you've blocked, you roll your damage as normal and subtract it from the attacker's damage total. If the defender exceeds the attacker's roll, then no damage is taken. If the attacker's roll exceeds the defender's roll, the remaining damage is applied to the defender or target of the attack. The damage is applied directly to the shield and may reduce its effectiveness or destroy it. If a shield is destroyed, any remaining damage is applied to the character as normal. This can be performed as many times as you have AP to spend. So, block had me for a moment, and then it lost me. And I think where it lost me is the idea of you don't roll to see if you succeed at blocking, but you can still somehow fail if you roll damage and the damage isn't enough. Which I don't see why that's necessary. If it's supposed to be a case of you still take some sort of... It's supposed to be like you take some sort of fatigue damage by blocking. Using the pattern that, say, Darth Vader does to overwhelm opponents of easily blockable attacks with just wearing down the opponent's stamina. That's more or less covered through them having to spend AP.
Yeah.
This whole thing of having to roll to block/parry and then having to roll for damage, I think it's going to be a bit counterintuitive. Or if nothing else, it's just an unnecessary step.
I'm trying to think of a rationale on this one. But I got nothing.
I think it's trying to account for cases like if you're trying to block with a shield and you get hit with a mace, that the energy transfer is still hitting you. But that's kind of a stretch, and two, that's in the granularity that I don't think role-playing games can handle very well.
At the very least, not with a system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No. But yeah, we've got called shots next.
Mm-hmm.
Which a character may attempt a called shot by adding 25 to the target number to hit. If this modified attack is successful, the called shot strikes the attacker's chosen location on the body. Attack rolls for called shots resulting in a total below 10 needed to hit the called shot, miss the target entirely. So it's the idea of harder shot makes it harder, but 25
on a 5d5 roll? I think that's a bit excessive. Well, 25 more.
Yeah. You would have to roll max on all of your dice just to account for this difference. Meaning you also have to hit your target number by all your other bonuses on their own added up.
Mm-hmm.
What the hell? I don't think we're missing anything here.
There is the fact that it's treated as a critical hit when it comes to incapacitating the area struck. But my mind is sticking on that whole you're adding 25 to the roll, which given the way rolls work in this, that's going to be seen as too much of a risk, and it's not going to be used.
Yeah. I'm kind of going to screw myself by jumping ahead to one of the monsters here, since this book does not have nice hyperlink bookmarks, but we have a Dradak at a natural defense of 14, so if I remember right, that's the target number you would have to hit.
Yeah.
So all of your bonuses would have to add up to 14 at least. Really. And that's if you roll 5 5s.
I have a feeling somebody would try and argue that called shot is meant to be for higher tiers of play, but I don't think that's enough of a reason.
I don't like how this math works out on called shot.
Yeah. Now, am I saying that called shot shouldn't have any modifier? No. I think it should be harder. I just think 25 is way too much. But Then we have casting a spell, which does have a variable TN. But if you take damage, try to move, dodge, or parry, you have to make a concentration skill check to continue the successful casting. Concentration is 20 plus 5 for each circle of the spell. So outer circle is 25, inner circle is 30, core is 35. Then add modifiers based on the situation. Damage taken is added to the total TN plus 1 for every 5 feet of movement, doubled if mounted. The caster may add a plus 1 to his roll for the concentration check for every rank he has in the discipline he is using. If he is successful, he continues as normal. Additional disruptions should begin at plus 5 to the TN respectively. If he fails, he spends his mana as if the spell were cast and the action points up to the moment of the disruption. Let's see, then charging. You announce that you wish to perform a charge. If your path to the target is unhindered and does not cause you to change direction more than 45 degrees, you may attempt to charge. So this is our good old bull rush. In order to charge, you rush towards your target. You can move as far as you need, but you only gain the benefit if it's a minimum of twice your or your mount's move. On the first attack following a charge, you receive a bonus of plus 2 to damage, and is -1 to hit and -1 to active defense for every 5 feet you move beyond standard movement. And it gives an example. Trent has movement of 10. He moves 20 feet away to charge, and receives plus 4 to damage, and is at -2 to hit and -2 to active defense. I think the question that I have in the back of my mind with this is that 2-hit bonus worth it, given the penalties? Or is that bonus to damage worth it, given the penalty there?
That -2 to hit might be a bit much.
Oh. So
See,
it's minus...
I'm fine with the defense and damage. I would just drop the -2 to hit.
Well, it's -1 to hit for every 5 feet. It would be -2 in that example.
Yeah, in that.
Based on how much you move. Having it be based on your movement rates, I could see that almost disincentivizing doing lengthy charges.
I think that penalty to defense is already fine. You get the bump to damage. You're slightly easier to hit because you're charging in a little more recklessly.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see why you'd ever want to do this. It's a rough penalty to have both of those on you for the +4 to damage.
Yeah. Now, you can defend or set for a charge using the Stand Fast skill. If successful, you double the damage normally done by weapon. If the charger is not killed by the attack, the charge continues as normal. Essentially the Swiss pikeman strategy. Let's see, then concealment, which can be modified by various factors. And let's see, then although the way the chart is set up is kind of awkward. See, then cover. Cover takes damage instead of you. Pretty standard. I do like that there isn't the whole partial versus total cover. Let's see, defense. If you choose to withdraw or defend yourself the whole round, so in other words, total defense, you can add your skill rank in your weapon to your overall armor value. If you take any action other than moving out of combat, you do not get this bonus. Let's see, if you're targeting a defenseless target, it's only TN 15. Killing a defenseless character takes 15 APs plus the weapon speed for the attacker to set up the strike. which, okay. Oh.
It seems like a lot, but whatever. If they're defenseless, they're not really likely an issue for. But okay.
Then disarm. In order to disarm, you have to announce that you're attempting it. The Tien to disarm is the defender's natural armor plus their agility, plus 5 if the weapon is two-handed. If a disarm attempt is unsuccessful, no damage is done. In the case of two-handed weapons, if it is successful for one hand but not for both, the target must ready his weapon again before he can use it. If it is successful, no damage is done, but the weapon is dropped at the feet of its owner or up to 5 feet away for every 5 points over Tien that you need to succeed. Which I'd say that is fair. It's gonna,
no problems with it.
Yeah. Let's see then. Dodging. You can attempt to dodge an attack by spending AP. If a character is attacked by someone, you can declare to dodge the attack. You deduct the necessary points for the dodge. 5 action points for the move from your AP total. Roll 5d5 plus dodge skill minus armor modifier. If the total of the PC's roll is equal to or higher than that of his attacker, the PC is dodged the blow. Okay, now that we know how dodge works, I have a feeling that in a game like this, people would see far more incentive to use dodge than to use parry.
Yeah, like something like Anima does it well, in which you have actual advantages and disadvantages and things you can do by blocking that you can't necessarily do by dodging, vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see anything like this here. This is just dodging is just better, it looks like.
I mean, yeah, your armor works against dodging, but that's it. You're not doing an extra step. The GM may allow a character to move from his original position with a successful dodge. This can be performed as many times as you want, as long as you got AP to spend. Let's see. So if a weapon is used to entangle, if a weapon is used to entangle, ensnare, or capture, you must do a damage equal to the target's aid, agility, or higher to succeed. Size modifiers should apply along with distinctions or skills. Once you've been entangled, you can attempt to escape using a skill. Though entangling does somehow still use the hit location chart, which, again, is going to cause the same problem we mentioned before.
Yeah. We got fainting up next, though. So this is the ability to make your opponent believe that you are going to perform one action, but change to another. Feigning is a bluff check versus target's will. If the attacker succeeds, the defender will spend 5 APs attempting to defend or position himself from a move that never happened. The attacker may immediately perform another action on the target if this feint is successful. The target does not move, he simply loses 5 AP. If the target succeeds, there is no effect on him, but the attacker must pay the standard AP cost for the feint. Every 5 points over the TN required, the defender loses additional AP. What was the AP cost for a feint? That's relevant here. Rolling up.
Didn't say there.
Huh. I'm not seeing it on the combat actions. So how much AP are you spending for the feint?
Yeah, that's a bit of an issue. And
I am going to assume it's 5 because that seems to be the consistent cost of everything.
Mm-hmm.
But if that's the case, you spend 5, they lose 5, and if you also roll high, they lose a couple extra.
Mm-hmm.
So the feint has to be cheaper, otherwise it's just not worth it.
Oh, yeah. Then we have flanking, which flanking both when two characters are in melee and attacking from opposite sides. Both receive +5 bonuses to skill checks. If 4 characters are involved, everyone receives +10. Then we have higher ground. If you're fighting from the high ground, make your Obi-Wan jokes. I know you got them. You receive +5 to any melee combat roll, including defense maneuvers. And you get higher ground if the target is kneeling, which that's a little bit specific.
I think we're getting a little unnecessarily specific with this, but okay.
Some effects can target mana directly, apply any damage to mana as you would a stamina-based attack. Then mounted combat, you gain higher ground if you're fighting on a horse to medium-sized or smaller. You have to work in conjunction with your mount, and the mount acts much the same as a character, moving on its agility rank with its own set of APs, spending points to hold or wait for commands from its rider. The latter can be avoided if the mount is trained for combat and attacks on its own. If the mount is killed or tripped, the rider must make a ride check at TN 25 plus the damage taken by the mount to avoid being thrown. If they are thrown, they take damage as from a fall of the height of the mount plus 5 feet. Now, the part about getting thrown off the mount, I'm fine with that. The part about needing a separate set of APs, I feel like that would disincentivize doing mounted combat. Because at the end of the day, you're managing 2 character sheets. This is the kind of thing that when I designed the Chocobo Knight, I was specifically trying to avoid.
Yeah, that just starts to feel like extra needless work.
Mm-hmm. Because at the end of the day, it more or less is extra work in the name of realism. But then we have moving ranged attacks. So moving while firing incurs a +1 to the TN for every 5 feet of movement. It applies to...
I'll say that feels fair.
Also applies to shooting at a moving target. Which fair, although possibly a little granular for my taste. Then parrying, which works similar to blocking. Let's see, and then prone, which grants higher ground advantage. Change position while in melee combat requires a agility check of TN 25 plus any damage taken during the most recent attack. Missile weapon attacks are -10 to hit prone targets. Let's see, push back and pull forward, 5 APs plus any move to target, so that's your shove. With a successful might check against the opponent to actually move them. Shields add their rating to the attacker's total as well. And Mouth thing. I've seen a lot of people change class when dealing with their pet character got annoying in many games. Yeah. The fantasy of having a companion or mount in that regard is certainly one that's going to be present, but a lot of games treat it as a micro character, and at the end of the day, no matter how much you dress that up, you are expecting someone to have multiple character sheets at that point. Even if a companion character stat setup is not nearly as complex as a full character, it's still at the very least an extra page.
Yeah. It's not undoable. Like, I think other than issues with how the class was designed itself. The Pathfinder Summoner was fine because everything kind of focused around the summon. So it's not really like it's a second character because everything's like revolving around that point.
Yeah, but the summon still has its own set of stats. So
Yeah. It's a little extra to keep track of, but in that case, it's not too bad. But you got to be careful with that because it can get annoying really quick. If you
I
don't
see you and I
get the
raise
system
you
right.
swarm summons because those are still a thing.
There's a reason I don't allow Master Summoner. It's not because it's broken, it's I don't want to deal with that. Dear God, why did they design Master Summoner?
Oh, he goes.
There was one in one of my games. It was a bit of a nightmare for a bit.
He goes. I've also seen players that will use pets as an HP buffer between them and the enemy, and just try to replace it, no problem when it dies. And you have to be like, where are you going to find another T-Rex?
Yeah. Animal companions and things like that have always had their issues.
I'm not saying that what I do is a solution, because what I do is tailor built for for the kind of game I'm trying to make. But I'd like to think I've avoided some of those problems. But then with Reach, it's pretty standard. Oh yeah, I forgot about ranged attacks, which somehow ranged also uses concentration.
Sure, why not?
Let's see. With offhanded fighting, costs 5 more AP, -5 to skill and damage rolls, stacked with other penalties. Fine. With subduing, you can basically subdue, if you wanted to knock somebody out, the good old blackjack. This can be done under the critical hit or cold shot rules with the achievement of a headshot, or a target may be beaten into submission with the broadside of a sword or hilt or dagger or other item. If you attempt to use it in such a way, you suffer -1 to your attack roll for every rank of the weapon. If your attack roll is unsuccessful, you can reduce the damage down to a minimum of 1d5 and may pull your punches and not apply any additional damage for extremely successful attack rolls. In order to trip an opponent, you have to make...
I just want to say real quick,
Yeah.
I appreciate the wording of beaten into submission. That just feels like such an unprofessional way to say it compared to everything else we've been reading.
Yeah. And with trip, in order to trip, you have to make a TN equal to the defender's armor value plus their agility. If successful, they're prone. Creatures with more than 2 legs or some tails can receive a natural bonus to defend against this type of attack. Which, fair. And then 2-weapon fighting, -5 on both attack skill and damage rolls, stacked with other penalties. Which would, I suppose, would make it -10, because 2-weapon fighting, unless you're skilled in it, is going to involve using your offhand.
I'd imagine you'd probably have ranks in 2-weapon fighting, or you'd be skilled in it. So I don't think that's really something that's going to come up, so sure, I'm fine with it.
Yeah. But then we have unarmed combat, which is a completely separate combat setup if both combatants are unarmed. But if one person is armed and the other is not, the armed person gets to act first, provided they're aware of the opponent and has the AP to do it. When an unarmed opponent strikes an area that is armored, the effectiveness of the armor is increased and the aggressor may take damage. Non-metal armors are increased by an effectiveness of 1 versus unarmed attacks and no damage taken by the aggressor. Metal armors double their effectiveness versus unarmed attacks, and the aggressor takes 1 point of damage for the original rank of the armor. which something about that doesn't sit with me. It's like that's a case of realism for its own sake.
Yeah.
But then
On one hand, I don't mind if this system's like going the route of, look, unarmored fighting, you're only going to be doing it if for some reason you're stripped down and you're just absolutely forced to. There's not like some kind of unarmed fighting method intended in the game. This always you're in a disadvantage unarmed.
Yeah.
Which I think that's what they're going for, so I'm like, okay, I'll run with it.
Yeah. But then we get to critical hits. These are if you get a total of 5 5s on your attack roll, so all 5s. For every 5 ranks you have in a weapon skill, you can reduce the number of 5s needed to score a critical by 1. It allows you to do 3 things. Roll your destiny again for additional damage, exploding rules apply. Causes damage to any armor or shield protecting that area, possibly reducing effectiveness. Causes the hit location to be incapacitated or the armor protecting the area to be destroyed. So, see, critical hit result. So, between there's different effects for armored and unarmored. And certain effects based on what got hit. And given that, the question could be asked of, okay, if I was still doing the whole 2d10 thing, how would I handle criticals here? I would say have criticals be doubles, but the minimum double that's required to trigger it is based on skill rake. Normally in order to crit, you'd need it to be double 10s, but for every few points, every few ranks, the double requirement goes down by 1.
Yeah. Not all dissimilar from Eclipse Moon Phase, I think. It's been a while since I played, but something along those lines.
Yeah. With Eclipse Phase, the critical and botch trigger is if you roll doubles.
Yeah.
If you roll doubles but it's not enough to succeed, then it's a botch. If you roll doubles and it's enough to succeed, then it's a crit.
Yeah.
But then we get to damage, which is kind of self-explanatory. And which goes into serious injury. If one or more of your aspects or attributes falls below the rank of your ES. Avoiding and reducing damage, dodging, blocking, parrying, all that, which we've already covered. And then recovery, which is basically the amount of stamina, will, or mana you can recover for every 8 hours of resting or every 24 hours of rest. Which, given the way it's set up, is very clear that it's meant to have a degree of grit, but I feel like the route to get there is a bit off. But then we get to magic. And the primary stat when it comes to magic is Essence, or ES. You cannot have... when it comes to using magic that's typically done through weaves, you cannot have a number of active weaves exceeding your Essence attribute. So, and it's very clear that spells are divided into disciplines. Magic is broken down into 3 circles: outer, inner, and core, with 9 disciplines of study. The outer circle contains the easiest energies to wield. The inner circle contains more difficult powers, while the core circle is comprised of the single most difficult discipline to master. Each circle involves the study of disciplines which allow casters to pursue different focuses. The outer and inner circles both contain 4 disciplines of study, while the core only has 1. So with the outer circle disciplines, you have Divinatus, or Divination, Curatus, Healing, Servatus, Protection and Defense, Vigorate, Imbuing Objects, so Enchantment. The inner circles are Lauratus, Deceptions and Illusion, Commutatus, Transformation, essentially, Proditus, which I guess would be the equivalent of Evocation, Advocatus, which would be Summoning, and Victus, which is described as using mana to create an object from pure energy. But then it also talks a bit about dark magic, but it's mostly a fluff piece on that. So that's with challenging a spell. So in other words, that's how spell conflict works. But and controlling a target, but what I'm trying to find here, there's a lot of outside stuff without going into what you're doing when you're actually casting.
This is like going over all of the combat modifiers before explaining how combat works. They seem to have reversed the order here.
Mm-hmm. And then after a couple of pages, then we get to spells. This should have been done a couple of pages beforehand.
No, I was trying to skip ahead too, like, where should we start here? None of this is making any sense.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so how spells work. If a character is a willing recipient of a spell, all the power of the spell will affect him. If they're unwilling, there's a resistance check, or caster must roll 5d5 plus their ES established. Okay, so basic saving throw type thing.
Yeah.
Spell traits. All spells share 10 traits as listed below. These traits start at a base of d5 or must be performed for the spell to work, such as a verbal incantation. Casters may create mana shifts with their skill ranks or mana point expenditures as explained above to increase or remove the necessity of a trait, such as casting a spell in silence without verbal, so make the spell more expensive, apply silence, or anything like that, basically. The traits are verbal, arcane gestures, material components, elemental base, casting time, resistance, power, range, target duration. Verbal incantations, is what you'd think. Same with arcane gestures, material component.
Mm-hmm. Now, elemental base, the type of power a spell projects. You can use a mana shift to shift the elemental base. Casting time, exactly what it sounds like. The casting time for each spell begins at 50 APs. A character may decrease the casting spell by 5 APs to a minimum of 10 by creating mana shifts. It can also be increased to reduce the cost of a spell. For each shift in time increments, the base mana cost is reduced by the cost of a mana shift. Then resistance is aspect plus D5, whether you're using passive defense or active defense. A caster combats a target's defense with its skill roll against it. 5d5 plus his rank in the discipline he's casting and his essence attribute. You can create a mana shift to add an additional d5 to the total roll. I'm going to scroll back and look through mana shift.
Now, while you scroll back, I'm scrolling forward to kind of get an idea of how spells are supposed to work.
So, mana shifts is essentially over-channeling or meta magic. You pay the base cost of a spell in mana points for each shift, or apply the number of skill ranks in a discipline to any traits at no cost. Maximum shifts are essence plus discipline ranks. So the amount of so it's basically you spending more MP to mess around with the traits, or you can do that automatically just by having discipline ranks. Then we have power, which is generally measured in ranks of D5. This is basically the effectiveness of the spell. It begins at D5 and increases by 1 for each shift. If you're targeting multiple targets, you get to determine what portion affects each target. So that's basically how powerful the spell is. See, then range, which is self-explanatory. Targets, which is also self-explanatory. Including going with multiple in area. Then duration. Apparently spells can go up to 1 millennia as far as duration goes, depending on mana shifts.
Okay. This is not a mechanics thing, this is a tone thing.
Mm-hmm.
At any point, anything we have looked at, have you felt like we'd be dealing with millennia-long curse players able to cast?
No.
I know I brought it up earlier. If this were Anima, that would not throw me off. Because that's kind of the high power that game established. But here?
Yeah, and also, again, the chart here throws me off without setup.
Oh, the thing that's throwing me off is when I looked ahead earlier back.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of a create your own magic thing, but not really.
Pretty much.
This section's just a mess of organization. I feel like everything's in the wrong spot.
And I get what it's trying to do with the whole sample spells here, but I really feel like this like, instead of referring to these as sample spells, this should have been the kind of spell effects that would fall under each discipline. So that people can have a bit of an idea on how the traits can be messed around with. Because otherwise, this is just the standard spell list.
Here's where I'm a little frustrated with this. On one hand, I like this the actual number of spells you have as examples is good, but what's my actual guidelines for base to create these spells?
Especially since for this kind of system, you'd need to know the AP cost for casting the spell as well.
It's...
Now the mana cost, we already have that covered.
This is the first time in this particular system I'm looking at this. This is just a mess.
Mm-hmm. But that more or less covers the combat and magic, which means it is high time for us to give our final thoughts on Shroud of the Ancients.
Here are my pre-magic section thoughts on Shroud of the Ancients. This was just an undercooked system. It didn't seem to have any kind of real focus. It didn't really feel like it committed to anything. I'm not going to call it bad, but it was very underwhelming. My post reading this magic section, did they take a chapter out of Valhalla?
I was about to ask.
It just ascended into what the fuck are we reading?
Yeah. Now, is it as bad as Valhalla? No.
No. We have one chapter that's okay, it feels like they might have pulled that out of Valhalla. The rest of it's just undercooked, and it's one of the worst kind of things to talk about because it's just not interesting.
Yeah. So, as far as where I sit, according to the PDF, this game came out in 2014. I have a hard time believing that. This feels like something from 2004. And part of the reason I say that is Valhalla was one of our early endeavors with Monarch and I regarding the Valley of the Judge, where it just descended to us losing our damn minds, and it has been the record holder of the worst TTRPG to be covered in the Valley of the Judge series, regardless of who my co-host is.
It was so bad.
It was basically a case of death by subsystems. It came off like something that came out from the late 80s. Which is a shame because it had a killer premise. But with Shroud of the Ancients, I get that it's trying to go for a kind of dark fantasy approach. Fine. But I think some of the big things that I have to ask is I don't see a strong enough reason as to why the game is using this 5d5 setup, aside from it kind of being a gimmick. Like it's not doing enough with it. And when it comes to the spread, I think you get a much better spread just going with 2d10. Not to mention, a d5 is going to be counterintuitive to a lot of people. I get what it's trying to do, and you can do it with d10s, and there are d5 dice. We did look them up a few weeks back. But one of the big reasons why I say this feels like it came from the early 2000s has to do with how character creation works. How there's not much of a bestiary with this setup, and the bestiary is built with the you build NPCs the same way you build PCs, which is something that I'm actually glad has fallen out of favor over the last 20 years. Like, that was standard fare for a lot of games, and these days the only games that use it are Universalist ones. And even then, that's going to be a bit of a stretch. The big problem with this sort of freeform design is that you end up running into a lot of traps. And a lot of the games that were boasted about being more freeform had those kind of traps a lot, or just had analysis paralysis. When it comes to the AP system, normally I like AP systems in games. With this, there are certain AP uses that just made me go, why? I think one of the big ones was movement. I'd say another big one was the way blocks and parries work. You know, just having unnecessary steps or unnecessary granularity. The skill system is borderline offensive regarding the skill bloat. It's bringing me flashbacks to use rope as its own skill. You should not be giving me flashback to that. Or the.
I just think the math in this game at times is. It just doesn't make sense. Like, I still can't rationalize the plus 25 to the target called shot.
Yeah, I can see that. I've tooled around with instead of adding to the difficulty, called shot just adds to the range for botches. You know, it's the same roll. It's just you have a higher chance of botching the roll if the RNG gods aren't on your side. Like imagine a D20.
I prefer the idea of. Oh, sorry, go on.
Imagine a D20. Imagine doing a call shot with a D20 roll, but if you roll, like say a 7 or less, then it's a botch.
See, I kind of still prefer the idea of making it a bit harder, but. This was too much.
Mm-hmm.
It almost makes it impossible for anything but maybe the highest levels of play.
Now, it could be argued that it isn't as much of an issue because of the Destiny die, which is an exploding part of which is one die that explodes like the wild die in D6. But you're still assuming that wild die is going to explode multiple times, and I'm not sure that's an assumption you should be making.
No, like I think the wild die is too much of a swing factor here. Just because I think I brought it up when we talked about the AP before, when we first came across it.
Mm-hmm.
When we kind of realized how that worked. Like, if you're not exploding on that die roll, that 1 to 4 AP is basically worthless. So it's this weird thing where it's almost pointless unless it hits, and then it can become such a huge swing. And there's like no in between here.
Which I could certainly see it.
It's hard to kind of judge off the top of my head how the math works out for that. But I suspect I just would not like the results of that exploding dice in this setup.
I feel like exploding dice should be an extra bonus, not a bandage. I have something close in the form of the extra effort system for Legend Edition, which is there more to reward rolling significantly over your target's defense when you're doing attacks. And it's there to give a reward for people who do have it set up where they're able to get a big difference, to make that difference matter, instead of, you know, if you beat the target by 1 or 11, it's doing the same amount of damage or the same amount of effect. You know, it's that sort of thing. And if I were to rate Shroud of the Ancients on my usual metric, I don't think I can go higher than Caution. That seems to be where my mind is at with this, because there's far too many asterisks when it comes to this game. The fact that navigation leaves something to be desired doesn't exactly help matters either, and just the fact that the GM is going to have to do some extra work when it comes to making NPCs with this, and since the game's kind of level-less, you don't really have a metric to work with. Like, there's too many asterisks for me to make this an easy recommend. Now, for people who like to dig deep when it comes to that sort of thing, I mean, fine, but I'm not sure if that's enough. And when it came to the magic system, that was a case of, what the did we just read? I get the intent of the magic system, but the execution, no. No.
That was just a mess.
Like, going into the specific rules before you even get into how the core mechanics of casting a spell goes just threw us off, for one. And two, it's talking about magic being freeform, but instead of just giving guidance on the individual disciplines, which only get a paragraph, what was listed as sample spells should have just been the spell list.
I'd have been fine just giving this game a typical spell list. I'm not against spell lists. I'm entirely okay with them. Just go with that.
Yeah. But all in all, the reason I have to go with caution is because of the fact that a GM is going to have to do a lot of work to wrangle this system. And I can't in good conscience give it any higher of a rating. I know we've talked about games that do have a bit of freeformness, like when we talked about Mysteries of the Yokai. But I think you'd actually have an easier time with Mysteries of the Yokai than you would with this.
Yeah.
Because I think our big problem there was just guidance. Here the problem is guidance. It is the bell curve. It is everything involving magic, and it is the fact that there's a lot of beginner's traps.
Yeah, I can't see a reason I'd ever even want to pick it up.
Yeah, some of the things I was thinking about, is there some stuff in here that I might crib for other games? I was gonna say maybe the way spells work when we know how they're supposed to work, but even that's a stretch.
Yeah.
I'm certainly not going to be cribbing the skill system, I can guarantee you that. But with that said, that will do it for this particular episode of The Valley, and thus this particular season of The Valley. We will be back in about a week's time, covering. Let's see, where did I put the schedule? Let me get that. Yes, covering Numinous Brutality. And then in 2 weeks, we'll be doing our full season with Strain. And that should be interesting to see where that ends up going. But until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra. I am your gaming monk. Stay fucking frosty, everybody.